It's great to have you with us today on our Thriving in the Age of Disruption podcast. We're going to make the big jump into the topic of entrepreneurship with our host, Dr. Ramesh Ramachandra, who's here to share with us what her new book is all about. I'm Hola Yun, the podcast series moderator, and I'm talking with Dr. Ramesh today with her author's hat on. From running afternoon tea dances as a teenager to earn pocket money, and to starting her own internet research company during the dot-com boom years in the 1990s. Dr. Ramesh has been bitten by the entrepreneurial bug early and has experienced the highs and the lows of the entrepreneurship journey. Having also run entrepreneurship training programs for several thousand people regionally, Dr. Ramesh has distilled her insights and consolidated her knowledge and skill sets into her book, The Big Jump into Entrepreneurship. Thank you, Dr. Ramesh, for taking the time today to share with us what your book is all about and how nurturing an entrepreneurial mindset can give us valuable life skills that will help us solve everyday problems, adapt to changes, manage risks, and create value in our work and our lives.
Well, thank you, Lion. It's been a long journey. When I wrote it in 2003, we had worked with almost close to 1,000 people because we were conducting national and regional entrepreneurship programs. So it was partly the materials that we had put together for the 2-day training program. And then, of course, over time, we also had feedback from participants because we continued with the training over the subsequent years. Well, it's now 2022 and a lot of things have changed. But one of the key things that had me consider updating the book was that at that time, and whenever people do our programs on entrepreneurship, most participants will walk away being in one of these 3 buckets. And the first group would be the group who go like, I'm ready to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to start my business. And in the course, they would have actually done up a sort of like a template business plan. And then there would be another third of the people who will go like, oh my God, entrepreneurship is not for me because it's too risky. I can't afford it. It's too stressful, and they're never going to do it. But they're open to saying like, okay, maybe I could try out some of these entrepreneurial mindset or skill sets at the workplace. And then, of course, there is the last group who are interested in entrepreneurship, but they think that their circumstances don't support them, either because they're paying off a loan or they've got young children. And you know, it's a struggle to balance these things. And they're like, when the time is right, when the right opportunity is here, I would go and be an entrepreneur and start my own business. But until then, I'm just going to be entrepreneurial at work. So that's pretty much why I think that it would be important even today to talk about entrepreneurship.
So in the last 20 years then, Dr. Ramesh, what has changed? What have you updated into this new 2.0 of your Big Jump into Entrepreneurship book?
It's good that you asked me this question because I was also thinking about that when I was refreshing the book. And I sort of identified 3 key things over the 20 years that has sort of changed, and some of the things have been somewhat timeless and not really changed, and in some ways remained very much relevant even today. So I have a new chapter. It's called the Chapter 0. And in the Chapter 0, I talk about these changes. I've also got some new case studies throughout the book and some other real life experiences that I've updated. The first thing that I talk about that sort of remained timeless has been the fact that whenever someone looks at entrepreneurship, one of the biggest hurdles that we've got to deal with is ourselves, the self-doubt, the lack of confidence. And that thing has not changed in the last 20 years. That piece about our own self-doubt on the one side, and on the other side is actually what our external world tells us, like our family and our friends and the community at large about entrepreneurship. So these 2 things, overcoming our inner voice of doubt, as well as what society thinks about entrepreneurship, is a struggle that everyone goes through, and that's still relevant. The second thing that I wanted to call out on was the fact that, you know, more in the last 20 years, especially in Southeast Asia, a lot of us have benefited from being able to go get really good education, and in fact, get even more qualified with masters and PhD. But the interesting thing is that because we are getting more qualified, as a salaried worker, we are also able to earn much more. So in some ways, you could say that as an entrepreneur, therefore, we stand to lose more because, immediately you can get a job which pays you good salary versus, oh my God, you've got to manage cash flow and you might not take a salary in your first few years because you're the entrepreneur, you're the owner, you're the founder. So in some ways, I guess this is a kind of a paradox because although we have the best educated people who are probably the best place to succeed, but they are also the ones who are the most apprehensive about starting their own business. And they also think that they will lose the most because they have the greatest opportunity in front of them as an employee. So opportunity cost is a very important piece. And I think people need to be able to deal with how they perceive that opportunity cost, whether it's a short-term opportunity cost. There is a saying which says, pain now for gain later. Are you willing to put in the pain now for a gain later? So one last piece as to why I've also updated the book is because I feel that, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, we've had a kind of impetus for a new generation of entrepreneurs. And I'm calling out to people who are women or even civil servants, people who are retirees or because they've reached a mandatory retirement age, or people who had to leave their jobs and retire early because their jobs have become redundant. And it's an opportunity for all these people to try their hand at entrepreneurship. And this is the time for them.
So, I mean, the wide relevance is there. Are there new insights then you've gained from all your experiences and your journey?
So, yes, I think there are three key things that I point out to in chapter 0. And the first thing was that when I wrote the book in 2003, we were in a period of transition. It was the early 2000s. It was the third industrial revolution, also known as the digital revolution. And that's when, we saw a lot of the technology business, internet automation, and even the word technopreneurship first became popular with a new breed of entrepreneurs who would raise millions of dollars and have a startup. In fact, in 1999, I did the same. I started my first startup company and I raised several $1 million. And from then to now, we're now into what we will call as the fourth industrial revolution. And this is marked by ever deepening digitalization. And I think the World Economic Forum actually would define it as a fusion of technologies that is blurring the lines between the physical, the digital, and the biological spheres. So in some ways, entrepreneurship is sort of enhanced digitalization. It started 20 years ago, and you're seeing a different expression of it with AI and virtual reality, and more importantly now, the metaverse. Then on the other hand, what is also happening is that and this is actually point number 2, which is that we have a shift in some of the mega trends. And these trends have actually highlighted a graying population, rapid urbanization, the impact of which is we have smaller nuclear families. We have also, to some level, a rise in digital addiction to social media as well as other forms. Maybe also a shift in global economic power, and of course, the ongoing power struggle between the US and China, and most recently, the global COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the point about the mega trends and the challenges is that it has forced all of us to look at how we live, how we work, and how we play. It has, for me, been very clear that entrepreneurship is even more relevant in this world of disruption. You need to have a kind of mindset or an ability to deal with circumstances that are changing and to be able to adapt or pivot, whether it is through a job loss or even just fundamentally to regain control of your life. the new form of leadership is actually entrepreneurial leadership, not just a normal leadership. So the third piece that I discuss in my chapter 0 is about looking beyond the traditional stereotypes that we have for entrepreneurship. Today, the new stereotype of an entrepreneur is someone who is highly educated, probably tech and business savvy, most likely a male in their 20s and 30s. He is someone who has a great pitch deck, a great vision, and who is not afraid to work 20 hours a day to achieve it. If you went back to 20 years ago and even maybe 30 years ago, that entrepreneur was the local pauke who drove a big Mercedes, who wore all these fancy bling gold jewelry, and was probably not respected because they were not terribly educated. The point is that we need to look beyond the stereotypes. Entrepreneurship is not just for these kind of people. It's actually for everybody. So let me share a little bit about why it's for everybody, right? So I feel it's a critical life skill because it helps us to solve everyday problems, adapt and manage risk to create value. So in my book, I actually say that it is to help us to be more resourceful in life. Why? Because you're looking at the entire process from identifying a problem to generating ideas to solve the problem and to creating value from whatever solution that you have come up with. And along the way, what you are doing is at all moments assessing the opportunity and managing the risk. I also think that it's important because it provides us a clarity. Because once we know what is the opportunity in front of us, whether we are working for someone or we are running our own business, we then know how to get someone else's buy-in into our own ideas and to be able to sell that product or service, or even to be able to adapt or change it so that it serves the market. People in corporates can be entrepreneurs or careerpreneurs, and they can contribute significantly to their companies by adopting this mindset, because it's all about doing new things and departing from customary ways in which we pursue traditional opportunities.
So, Dr. Ramesh, you look at it as having a mindset or a set of skills versus being entrepreneurial as just starting your own business. So even for those of us who are employees, it could be very relevant. So how can we be more entrepreneurial at the workplace?
Great question, right? If I look back at my own career, I've started a business and run it for, maybe 20 years. And I've also worked as an employee for other people for 10 or 15 years as well. So if you're an employee, it's not just a matter of doing your work as per your job description. You can be someone who is trying to do your job in a bigger way, a better way, a faster way. It could be also a question that you could ask, am I close right now to considering what is new or unique? Because I fear that I could fail, or maybe I think that it's not worth the trouble. So if we had an entrepreneurial mindset, then what we are doing as employees is that we're looking for new solutions to the problem. And that's how opportunity identification begins. We are not close to new ideas, and we are still willing to explore them, even though there are uncertainties and fear. Because we realize that if we don't do that, then our organization will stagnate and eventually be disrupted because our competitors will be doing whatever they need to keep ahead. So like, my favorite example is of civil servants in Singapore, because they traditionally are risk averse. They appear concerned about pushing papers and enforcing rules. There is a creative tension for them because there is certainty with the known. And on the other hand, the world is transforming and everything is disrupting. And how much of it do they actually go out and innovate? Because if they were to fail in that innovation, there is a direct consequence to perhaps their reputation, to their future promotion and bonuses. Yes, it is partly our culture that has them to be so fearful of taking that risk. But beyond that, as an individual, we can all give ourselves the freedom to make mistakes and to learn from that. And if, for whatever reason, we fail 100 times, but we had that one success. I'm sure that one success would overwhelmingly make a bigger difference than, not having tried out any other time.
And I would then come back to your own experience, Dr. Ramesh, through your own entrepreneurship journey. It's been full of ups and downs. Would you do anything differently on hindsight?
Well, I wish someone could have taken away some of the pain when I had the challenges. But if I really consider the challenges and the successes, I think, Layun, I had the opportunity to learn, grow, and develop mostly when there were challenges. When I had the successes, I didn't stop to reflect because I was off to the next goal. But it was only in the challenging moments that I had to stop. I had to reflect. I had to adapt. And that made me a better person. I wouldn't change anything. In a few months' time, I will also be releasing another book, a book which details my own journey. I had started off with a technology company in 1999 and had raised money. We had wanted to list it in the stock exchange, and we didn't do that. It got aborted. Instead, we ended up liquidating the company, and it was a public failure for me. And so when I first wrote the Big Jump book, it was soon after I had failed, and I couldn't envisage my life. What was I really going to do? Was I going to crawl under a stone? Was I just going to become an ordinary employee, or was I ever going to go back and become an entrepreneur? And all these questions were there. And so in this book, The Big Jump into Entrepreneurship as a Way of Life, I actually take the readers through my own journey so that they can learn from it, the lessons that I learned, and see what they would like to do so that they can create entrepreneurship as a way of life for themselves as well.
And that is something you've enabled of others along the way. Do you have any stories you can share with us about some of the successes or even breakthroughs you have helped clients to achieve on their entrepreneurship journey?
When I first started teaching people about entrepreneurship, it was a 2-day program. And out of that 2-day program, for the 30% who will go out and start a business, it was clear some of them would really make it phenomenally, and some of them would find success in having a life that worked for them. And some of them would start a business and they would fail. But my interaction with them was from that 2 days. So today I run a consultancy firm, and our main focus, corporate culture change initiatives, where we look at how companies can have a new level of performance. But from time to time, inside of this corporate culture change, we sometimes get a project which is a lot more entrepreneurial. Let me share with you how we worked with a Thai client over 8 months as part of a corporate culture change initiative. But this particular piece was to support them to pivot from being a distributor of food ingredients to becoming a manufacturer. What had happened was they had a drum dry machine that they bought 5 years prior to that, and they tried many things and get the project off the ground. And for various reasons, they couldn't. The machine was just lying in the factory. It had never been started, didn't know how to figure out what kind of products to make and who to approach and how to sell it. So it was a meeting that we had with this client. And I remember that I had taken 2 packets of the Irvin potato chips, the salted egg potato chips. And I was excited because I knew about her drum dry machine. And I said, well, have you tried this potato chip? Because it's got this salted egg, which is a great seasoning. And I'm sure your machine can do it. And so we opened up the packet and we ate it. And she goes like, yeah, I think we can. I'll go and ask my R&D consultant whether they can do that. And she excitedly called me a week later and she said, we can do this. And what do you think? Can you help our team to put this whole thing together so that we can market it and commercialize this product? So I said, okay, let's take 8 months. Our request to her was, because she was the founder, but she had retired, that she come back and she be part of a team of 10 people. And we took this small team through a process where they looked at what was the problem. And the problem was They had this machine which was sitting in their factory, which had not been used, and to then identify what was some of the ideas. And so they decided that they were going to produce these fine powders. And these fine powders are essentially vegetables and fruits, and they can be used as food ingredients in seasoning powders, or they can be used in shakes, or they can be used in noodles or in potato chips. It was from the R&D process to the production to then how do we get our first clients, and how do we then sell it to our clients, and how do we then sustain it as a business. We said we'll take 1 month to get the R&D up and running. We'll take another 1 month to do the production, because in the third month we were going to take part in a food trade show. And then in the food trade show, we collected a lot of leads from there, and some of the leads we had to go and qualify them. And then 5 months within the project, we had identified 1 or 2 clients and started to sell 2 metric tons a month. And then eventually it was 10 metric tons a month, just from one single product, which was the salted egg, except that the salted egg that they produced was made out of duck egg, rather than chicken egg, which the Irvin's salted egg mix is made out of. I think that's a great example of an entrepreneurial effort within an organization where the entire team had to change their mindset about how they were going to deal with the problem, identify the opportunities, and create value. And along the way, they had to challenge their own assumptions about what could be done or what couldn't be done, and had to take the actions in a sequence, in collaboration and coordination with each other in the different teams, so that the eventual product could be sold.
And that's a really interesting example. And who doesn't love salted egg, right?
Yeah.
So now that is with an organization. Is there an instance where you were coaching a specific individual on his entrepreneurial journey versus working with an organization? Tell us a little bit more.
Let me think now. Oh, okay, so it's another example in Thailand as well. We work with family businesses, and we'd worked with this, which also owned other commercial retail properties. In the business, they had several family members working, although it was largely run by professionals. This third generation family member wasn't really happy in the job that they were doing. And I started to engage with them to explore how he could leave the family business so that he could start something entrepreneurial on his own and get a sense of satisfaction, as well as learn new skill sets. So the journey was, as me as a coach come mentor, to work with him to a point where he was comfortable enough to give up his day job, work out how he was going to sustain himself whilst he got his new business off the ground. Part of the entrepreneur's journey is that you have plans, and you have to make sure that you keep working your plan, and that when the plan doesn't go according to plan, that you are adapting and changing it. And so just being there, sounding board to listen and to keep him moving to a point where he became reliable. And in this process, he did his own research. He had to learn new things and develop new skill sets, and become really confident about someone who was able to create and bring to the marketplace an idea of his own and have it be successful. And, Lion, the most amazing thing about this was that his product was in the furniture category. And the best way for him to market was through digital marketing. He invested a lot of time and effort learning that whole space. And this was well before COVID-19 hit us. And when that hit everyone globally, and for a while there was lockdown and people could not go and do physical shopping, and his family business was affected, I think he went back and he was able to contribute the new skills that he had learned from his digital marketing to the core business itself. A good example of someone who, as a third generation, took his own entrepreneurial activities and was able to value add back to the original business.
Excellent, excellent. So you're a coach and enabler, Dr. Ramesh, but
Yes.
I'm trying to understand a little bit better of how you are also a practitioner, right? So tell us a little bit more.
Sometimes people get annoyed with me because I would go to a mall or I'll be walking and then I will stop and I will be staring at something and furiously writing in my notebook. And what I'm doing at that point is that I've observed that there is a long line of people at a particular hawker center or at a shopping mall. In that moment, I'm curious. I want to know, what are people standing in line for? What could they be potentially buying? And I'm doing a sum of, okay, how much are they earning? And it's that kind of curiosity that I bring on a day-to-day basis. So I'm constantly looking at my environment to see what's changing, what are the new trends. I talk to people, whether they are my clients or my friends. I ask them, what's working, what's not working. I'm engaged in trying to solve problems. And I think that's the key thing about an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is always interested to solve a problem. And in fact, if you ask me, right, what do I do at work? I would say 90% of the time I'm solving problems. I have only 10% to do what I'm supposed to do in my own accountability, because the rest of the time, I'm trying to make things work. I'm trying to get things to move to the next stage. And that is how I keep myself excited and connected to the ground.
And all those insights from the practice of entrepreneurship, from your own journey, from the coaching and mentoring that you're doing through the years, you've distilled down into your book, right? The new edition of it. So tell us, how can users or readers best benefit from your book?
I decided to break it up into 3 sections. I assumed that there would be a group of people who are curious to know what it takes to be an entrepreneur. And so I take them through that journey. Like, do they have the necessary motivation? Do they have the necessary skills that can be translated into a business? The second piece is for those who have always dreamt about being an entrepreneur and they're sort of ready to take the first step, and yet they need that next push into like, how do I organize myself? Okay, so then I address that for them. The last group of people that I reach out to is for those who have already started on their entrepreneurial journey. And because it's a journey which I tell people is lonely, sometimes even if you have co-founders, there are struggles that you have to deal with, whether it is you have enough cash flow to pay the salaries or to pay the rent. And often you need to have your own inspiration and ways to motivate yourself. So that's the third group of readers that I'm reaching out to, who are entrepreneurs and who need the validation of hearing from other entrepreneurs. So what I've done in the book is that I've got quizzes, activities, checklists. It's dynamic, it's interactive. It's almost like you are in a program with me. The tests are not psychometrics, but they are really to increase your self-awareness and understanding. The intention is that at the end of reading this book, you would have grown personally and professionally. And you now can see there's a difference between having an entrepreneurial mindset, which everyone can have, no matter where you're working, and that you can take the other step of becoming an entrepreneur, and that the choice is yours and that you can do this anytime.
Yes, and you're using a catchy term, the big jump, as your book title. I'm curious, why the big jump for your book series?
Yeah, there's an ancient saying which says that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And I like to propose to people that the big jump starts with just that one step. And to many of us, it is this gap between being employed and venturing out on our own, which seems like it's so wide that it requires that big jump. But in reality, you can take it in steps. The big jump story that I've used is adapted from the original story by Benjamin Elkin, which was written in 1958 and published by Random House. Everything can be broken down into small steps. So if you're reading this book, the first step is you're doing the quizzes, you're doing the activities. It's a small step, but that's how you get connected to that current reality. The second step is that out of doing these activities, now you have material, now you have data, and you can go and create maybe the business plan. And then you will know what is the next step, because if it is not the business plan, then you're going to use it as a mindset. You've got now a kind of momentum going. And because you have a momentum going, it takes you to the next step.
That's great. Now, tell us a little bit more on what sort of issues the book deals with.
So in the book, I address this whole thing about fear of failure and losing face. And that's a big thing in Asia. I also have, for people who are looking at entrepreneurship, some checklists so that they can explore their motivation, their goals, as well as be able to evaluate their entrepreneurial skills. Next, I go on to creating for people how to spot and seize opportunities by sharing what other people have done. And subsequently, I would walk them through the process of developing and evaluating, and maybe even begin executing on a business plan. It's also important to know that with entrepreneurship, there are so many ways in which you can get started. You can be freelancing, you can be self-employed, you can buy a franchise, or you can even buy over an existing business. You don't have to start a business from scratch. The key point that I leave the readers with is that whilst you can consider all this, what is even more critical for all of us in today's world, the world of disruption, right, is actually the entrepreneurial mindset. So that's my key intention, that each one of us gets interested in what would it take to develop an entrepreneurial mindset.
And for our listeners who want to take a deep dive into this topic, how can they get a copy of your book?
Oh, that's interesting. So my publisher told me that it's being published online, and subsequently we'll have an audiobook as well as the hard copy print. But right now, people can go to Amazon.com and search under the Big Jump series title, or under my name, Dr. Ramesh Ramachandra. This book is, of course, called The Big Jump into Entrepreneurship 2.0. And I do believe that if you go in there right now, until 22nd of February 2022, when we are officially launching the book, there will be a special promotion. And so it'll be a good time to go and grab an ebook.
Thank you, Dr. Ramesh, for sharing your thoughts and your new book with us today, and those very concrete steps on how we can take the big jump into entrepreneurship. I especially like your point about entrepreneurship being a critical life skill, that building that mindset and skill set can support us to solve everyday problems, to adapt to changes, to manage risks along the way, and to create value. So listeners, do go to Amazon.com or the website dr-ramesh.com right after this for your copy of the book. We hope you'll find it useful, and we would love to hear your feedback on how the book has made a difference to your life. So see you on dr-ramesh.com. Thank you.
Thank you.